Hello there and welcome to Loch Ness Living. Today I have come over to the Black Isle, which is about 40 minutes drive from where I am over in Loch Ness. You come through Inverness and onto the Black Isle, and I've come to Fortrose to meet Julie from the Black Isle Yarns, who's going to give us some of the stories behind her yarns and inspiration. So tell us a little bit about what is Black Isle Yarns. What do you sell?
So Black Isle Yarns is a business based here on the Black Isle, obviously, and I have a long-running interest in sheep and land management and how things have grown and where they come from, and I've always sewn, and not really always knit, a little bit when I was wee, and I've come in a very circuitous route to the knitting world. Having been an ecologist and forester, and then stopped working for children as I stopped working with them when number 3 came along, but started sewing, and then quite quickly fell into designing for one of the British sewing magazines, quilting magazines. So I did that for a few years, and I still do that a little bit. And then more recently I started knitting quite a lot. And
because it's quite cold up here.
Not for that reason. I love cold. So I don't think it is for that. But that would be sensible.
Yeah.
It would be. No, just as actually, I think it's downtime from the sewing, because sewing when I squeezed it in was work. So then I started knitting, but now I've turned knitting into work. And because I love plants, I think I started naturally dyeing. Mm-hmm. I tend to have a fairly good mental map of what plants are where. I spend a lot of time outdoor walking, so the more I knew about natural dyeing, the more I thought, oh gosh, I know where there's gorse, and I know that there's that lot of flowering just now, and I know where I could find some alder cones really easily, and I could just take 5 minutes on one of my normal dog walks and pick up the alder cones for dyeing with, or whatever. So I started practicing and playing with natural dyeing just for fun, but then got very frustrated because I couldn't find at all easily wool that was even British to dye on.
Joe, it's so interesting. So many people who I speak to, when we talk about the journey and how did you get to where you are, it's like, well, it was because I was doing the thing and I couldn't quite get exactly what I wanted. And that's exactly the same as me when I do the design. It was like, Joe, I was making so many adaptations to patterns in the end.
Well
So I just started doing it myself.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. Well, that's what I did with sewing, because I never followed anyone else's pattern, so it made sense to then actually see if anyone wanted to buy what I was doing. But
so you particularly were trying to find British wool?
Well, I started off by just trying to find British wool and found that was really difficult, and that just drove me nuts. Yeah. Because I know I grew up with sheep. Yeah. I know we have a lot of sheep. They're
and
not
normally
always...
not quite. Oh yeah, we can see sheep out the window from here. You can
see
sheep out the window at my house. There's sheep everywhere in Scotland.
Doesn't mean they're not all sheep with the best wool, but there are some British breeds and sheep that are in Britain that are not necessarily natively British, who have wonderful wool, and different wool can be used for different things. You don't need, for a pair of mitts, you don't need smooth, soft, especially if you're going to put it on a 5-year-old who's going to go out and play in the mud, which is what mine does. Yeah. So I just got very frustrated and looked into. Then I started looking to think, well, this is even more nuts. I'm using local plants to dye with, but I can't find British wool, and then even if I am using British wool, it's not local British wool. Yeah. So I somehow or other came to the conclusion that I was going to have some wool spun just from local sheep, because the person...
If nobody else is doing it, you've got to solve that problem yourself.
Yes, and this was just for me, but then when I looked into it, I thought, well, if I'm going to do some just for me, I may as well make it a little bit bigger, and that's where Black Isle Yarns came from. So it was a bit of an accident.
It was meant to be. And so what you're how many years into...
So just 18 months.
So fairly
not
new,
even 18 months, actually.
Fairly new, kind of just still finding your feet and exploring things at the moment. What kind of British wool have you managed to find so far?
Oh, so it's more actually what have I worked with, rather than what there is unlimited amounts locally.
The exploration
so
going.
I keep very local. So my most local, my very first batch was Scotland wool. So there is a little organic small holding on the Black Isle, which I get my veg box from, and Dan and Rachel also have a wee flock of Scotland sheep. So I've started buying their wool, and they were using their wool was not being used other than as a slug barrier around their polytunnel.
Oh my goodness!
Or sometimes insulation. So, and it's absolutely stunning.
Yeah,
stunning wool. This is it in these designs here.
Lovely, kind of chunky.
Yeah, so this is quite a thick DK.
Yeah.
So it's not quite. They've got a little bit of Shetland in them, so they're not pure Gotland. Pure Gotland is quite lean, a little bit more like a long wool in some ways.
Yeah.
So that was my very first batch. So they're actually a Swedish breed of sheep, but happen to be. I mean, they're 3 miles as the crow flies from here, if that.
Yeah.
Happen to be very, very local, and they come in beautiful shades of grey.
I should think it's really nice if you're looking for something kind of more rustic, substantial, big chunky hats and things like that. Something that's how's the lanolin on it? Is it got an element of waterproofing, weatherproofing?
Yes, it's not. I wouldn't use it as a really. So this is I find really interesting. There's different people come from different standpoints of what they find. Maybe what you would call rustic.
Yeah.
And to me, this is almost heading towards quite luxurious. Whereas obviously from your end of the scale,
from the world of Kashmir,
that's right.
I like to live in.
It's relatively rustic.
But I'm kind of forced into the world of Kashmir. Not by the choice of what I would want in it, but it's by the choice of my customers and the visitors who come to Loch Ness and buy what I'm making. Is that most of them don't knit for themselves. It's mostly tourist visitors, and they wouldn't understand if I was to kind of give them something like that. They would. Most people who don't, people know this themselves when they're making gifts for other people. They'll lift things up and they compare it to what they've bought that's been mass produced and factory produced, and the softness and the feel is not the same. So they're looking for something that kind of is like that but not like that.
Oh, I absolutely understand
and I'm trying to balance that middle world.
I think there's a big element of education and understanding involved. So if you're going to go for the pure wool, so typically I think, particularly if people are looking for something that can be washed, which is then probably being superwash treated. Yeah. So it's actually lost quite of the woolly properties that it originally had anyway through fairly severe treatment and chemical treatment often to make it superwash. The wool will have come from, it'll probably be merino, and it'll probably be from Australia, possibly New Zealand, and it'll have been spun in China, typically dyed in China, and then we buy it here as pure wool, which is wonderful. It is pure wool and it is a natural product, but it's less natural than it was, and it's certainly not helping support the British farming industry, or any local business at all. Well, I suppose it's supporting the business who is selling it, and it's lovely to knit with if you're looking for, but it can be fairly generic, and so I think it's different, and there will always be a case for, if you're not. If you're really busy and you've got wee kids, then you don't necessarily want to hand wash. Well, I mean, I do, and I use washable nappies and things.
I think you can if you're a knitter and you've got a basket full of hand washing, it makes sense. But if you're not a knitter and you've got one thing that's been given to you as a gift, then it becomes a fad.
That's right.
And
there's absolutely nothing wrong with using imported wool. I mean, it's a matter of interest and preference. Yeah. So I realise I might be sounding quite critical, but that's not what I was intending to.
I think it's about kind of letting people know. You go as far back in the process as works for your business.
That's right.
I'll take it as far back as the dyeing, and that's as far back as I could go because the luxury wool isn't made in Britain and it doesn't suit my customers. So I kind of stop there. But you take it further back because that suits your business, and you've managed to. What else have you managed to find?
Well, so I was thinking in terms of when I was talking about education, I was sort of thinking towards the knitters understanding the properties of different wools, and that while, for example, your imported merino is wonderfully soft, it's not necessarily going to be hard wearing, and it might really pill.
That is true.
So some of by looking more in depth and looking at what's around, you can start exploring the just wonderful different properties of different breeds of sheep.
And that is worth doing, because how many people have had that knitting story where they've made something, they've put hours and hours into making something, and it's just not quite right. I remember making like a beautiful summer top or something, and I was trying different yarns, and I made it with the bamboo yarn. And of course you get bamboo yarn wet, and you know it was 4 times bigger than I wanted it to be, and I hadn't realised that that was what was going to happen, because I didn't really know that was going to happen with the yarn. And I think everybody's had got an experience like that where the yarn didn't quite match what they were trying to make, and what a shame.
And it's not that there was the yarn was bad.
No, it just wasn't a good match.
Yeah, that's right. Or something with a lot of alpaca in it that you
alpaca socks I made once. Gorgeous, beautifully soft, but wore them once, and because it was pure alpaca, I didn't realise that really alpaca and socks are great for bed socks, but it needs to be blended with something to give it that hard wearing look. So they were beautifully soft for the one time that I managed to wear.
Oh, that's such a shame.
And then felted.
But that's okay, because felting's useful in terms of helping them last a bit longer.
Yeah, make them live a bit longer. But yeah, I mean everybody's got that experience somewhere in their knitting history.
Yeah. Or any kind of making. Quite honestly, you can sew yourself a dress in the wrong material and it'll look awful, because you want to drape your dress and you've done it in heavy cotton and it'll just be a sort of wedge, or the other way around. So.
I think that happens quite a lot when you buy things online as well. You don't get to touch, and you don't get to feel, and you don't get the conversation with people. So like this is a chance for us to kind of have that conversation.
So, bearing that in mind, I do always say to people, please, if you do buy online from me and not at a show, or you haven't contacted me to talk about it, and it's just been a purchase, and the shade is not what you're expecting, or it's not right for the project you had in mind, just let me know and bring it back, send it back, because I really, really don't want anyone knitting with something that wasn't what they were expecting. And I think that's really important. I don't want anyone to feel obliged to hang on to something that just wasn't. It happens. We all do it.
We bought something, and maybe it'll sit in the naughty corner for a while and just not quite sure, and then you'll often end up giving it away to somebody because it wasn't quite a fit. I mean, I'm sure it finds a home eventually, but it's a shame if somebody comes away with that experience and thinking, "Oh, that wasn't quite what I expected."
That's right, and it can happen. It doesn't mean that with the best will in the world, it's very hard to photograph shades precisely, and I'm sure you do exactly the same. Do our very, very, very best. But even a description of a shade as well, different people's perception of colour is so different that one person can describe exactly the same thing in exactly the same light, and it could sound like an entirely different shade.
I keep waiting for it to snow and take them out into the snow, because that gives the best light of best colour. But even then, people are viewing on different devices.
Yes, that's right.
And you just account for that and do the best that you can.
Sorry, I keep
and these are all natural.
These are all natural
shades, and that's really interesting to me that you get such a variation without it going near any dye.
That's from one flock of sheep. So this is the Gotland sheep from the Black Isle. So the Gotland don't typically have white, but this flock have a bit of Shetland in them, and so their colour ranges from deep charcoaly grey up to a creamy white. And so these, I don't have the darker 2 shades of grey here, but these are the 2. The cream and the lighter grey, and that's the mid grey of the Gotland. So the absolutely natural colours are just absolutely stunning without any dye in them at all. And then this one is a Swarbles flock in Bewley, so it's kind of halfway between here and you.
Near to me.
And these are a prize-winning flock of pedigree Swarbles. They're really mollycoddled lot of sheep. I know Jim from my forestry days. Jim was involved in the engineering side on the big harvesting machines, but he now has this they're very, very handsome sheep, and these again are not actually British breed. Unfortunately, they're Dutch, and they're the very, very, very dark brown ones with the white blaze down the front. Quite handsome, tall.
I think
sheep.
I've driven past these.
You
sheep.
probably have. They're just on the right hand side as you're coming in this direction out of Bewley. So on their own, I don't have the pure Swarbles is a very deep dark brown. It's a really nice rich brown. But it's not, so this is down back to the properties of individual breeds of wool.
Yeah.
Swarbles on its own is, I think, what a lot of people would call quite rustic.
Yeah.
So it would be fantastic for a really heavy, strong Gansey jumper or a pair of working mitts.
Yeah.
Or even boot socks, actually. Great for that. And I mean, some people will happily wear it as next to their skin. It depends on your tolerance level, but I think the majority of people would prefer Swarbles not wrapped tightly around the neck. So this is blended with Blue-Faced Leicester. And the Blue-Faced Leicester just gives it a lot more drape and adds a bit more smoothness and softness to it, and shifts the shade from the deep dark brown to a sort of quite a steely grey. It interests me that adding white to dark brown doesn't give you pale brown.
No.
A lighter brown, it gives you a grey.
That's interesting.
But it's consistent.
And that's never seen a shade of dye, but there are tones and variations, and there's interest going on in there, and I think that's nice if you're knitting, to have interesting kind of
it's I mean,
tones turn up.
You will have that sort of overall grey effect if you knit a jumper in it, but it's got tones, as you say, which just adds a bit more depth.
It almost reminds me actually of Harris tweed. You know, when you from a distance, Harris tweed looks almost. Well, it's not flat, but it's one colour. You get up close to Harris tweed, and there are so many shades of variations. Yeah. It's beautiful, and I think these natural blends remind me of that.
A lot of that comes down to the skill of the mill that I use. So I use a very small mill in the borders called the border. So the Scottish borders called the Border Mill, and they started off as an alpaca spinning mill. Right. So they have, they no longer have, but John and Juliet did have their own flock of alpaca, and they custom spin for customers. So because they work relatively small scale, they very much take each batch of wool on its individual merits and spin it to bring out the best of just what's in front of them.
So how much comes out of those batches then? This is small batch producing. So really...
for example, you typically with one of the really big commercial mills, I think you might be, well, it depends where you start from.
Right.
If you're starting from raw fleece, you're probably looking to get 60 to 70% back. Wow. If you're working with a big commercial scale mill such as Laxton's, you'll need to send the raw fleece to be scoured first, which is cleaned in one place. It then needs to go to another setup to be carded, and then it goes onto the mill to be spun. One of the advantages for me at the scale I'm currently at, working with a smaller mill, is they do beginning to end. It's also a gentler process, so you'll find, I don't know if I see any bits, but you will occasionally get a little bit of moss, or in fact, possibly isn't in any of this lot. But I think that's quite nice, because it just means you know that the animal was out in the field having a nice life.
Yeah.
And I'm very selective about the flocks I work with. So having grown up with sheep and with vets for parents, I don't want to work with anyone who's not got really good welfare and really look after their livestock. And if you do find the odd bit of moss, you just take it out. It doesn't have an impact on your knitting at all.
I think but that's a nice way to look at it. There's a lot of, you'll see discussions maybe on Ravelry, sometimes people will be not so happy to find bits and bobs in their wool, but if you see it as, it's nice, my sheep was outside living a nice life.
Yeah. Well, I say so. You wouldn't. It's there in my details that you might find the odd bit of vegetable matter. So hopefully nobody would get it by surprise. So the Border Mill do a great job of, for instance, spinning so that you've still got the colour variation rather than, which I really, really, really like. They could blend it much more thoroughly and get a much more even end result. But I like the slightly tonal end result. But as I'm looking to grow, I will move on to using bigger and bigger mills. But I think I will always carry on using smaller mills in order to put through some of the small fun batches and just try different breeds and try different spinning methods, and so that I can carry on working with some of the small farms that I'm currently working with. So for instance, this is a long wool blend. So long wool are very typical, traditional British sheep, not meat breeds. So for Blueface Leicester is heading towards being a long wool, but it's a Wensleydale, Cotswold, Lincoln long wools. So they're the sheep that be quite tall and skinny, with long, really wriggly fleece.
Yeah.
And it's very drapey and with a real sheen. I think you can see the sheen on this. So this is a blend of Wensleydale and Cotswold from a small flock, just outside Beaulieu as you're heading up towards Glen Affric. And Jane she just loves sheep, and she works in the farming world, but she has her flock as a hobby, and she just collects a variety of different breeds. So she has a few Wensleydale and Cotswold, and it's been really fun, to be able to give her some money back for her, much more than she would get from the wool board, and produce quite a small batch of wool, which has been really popular. Actually, this is all that's left of it. It's quite flamingo coloured.
Yeah.
So I dye all my coloured wool is naturally dyed. So following on from my original interest, so this is naturally dyed with Saxon indigo, which is a kind of a formula of indigo. It doesn't require an indigo vat, which these blues here have used an indigo vat. So that's the proper traditional indigo method.
Yeah.
These are dyed with Saxon indigo and Kutch, and it's sort of quite a tonal. It shows you how it would knit up, so it's quite tonal.
Yeah.
And these are dyed with madder, which is a really traditional, long used natural dye. I think madder was where you got your red and your red coats.
We are trying to grow some of that in our garden. Yeah, at the moment.
You have to grow quite a lot to dye on any scale, so that's where it gets
it's just an experiment.
Tricky, because I would love, and I do have some dye plants in the garden, but not enough to supply me with what.
No,
because with madder you're using the root as well, so you get
so that takes the plant.
Yeah, it's not as if you're just growing a shrub and harvesting some of it. It's a tricky one, and that's something I need to be careful with if I'm collecting in the wild. Whatever. If I use lichen, I'll only pick up fallen lichen.
Yeah.
And
we've mentioned that before when I was interviewing Rosie from Wild Rose Escapes. She was very keen to kind of stress that and to make sure that all of us that are going out foraging, make sure we pass that message along, that we're not taking from the wild, because lichen particularly is so special to our area. I'm fortunate enough, I've got trees in the garden, I'll only take lichen that's fallen down. So even though there is maybe a message out there of go for sustainability, don't use chemicals, or prefer to use organic, you have to balance that against, well, if we go completely in that direction, we would be taking from the wild in a way that's not sustainable.
Yes, it would be possible to do it in a non-sustainable manner.
Do even more damage. So we have to find the balance.
So I do buy in, for example, the madder. I buy in madder root from a reputable company. So I use a mixture. I'll collect bramble leaves, and I can use that with. So you can also change colours either by layering up colours. Yeah. So for instance, that's indigo on its own, and then that's indigo over annatto, and annatto is what's used to colour cheese.
Oh yeah.
That's good. So this was a sort of quite an orangey colour before the indigo went over the top. This was indigo over a pale pink, and then that's indigo over the annatto. That's indigo over the orange. Oh. This is indigo over a sort of a soft brown.
So this has got the green tones.
So you can see it's giving the green tones.
Blended, yeah.
So my dye plans for later on today are creating more green tones. So I'm going to be doing indigo over heather flowers. And heather flowers will give a yellow base. And then the indigo over the top should, fingers crossed, give a spring green colour.
It is so fascinating, the variation that you can get, all the different blues from overlaying and dyeing together.
And you do that with your colours. Your colours are absolutely stunning.
Thank you.
And the way that you create the changes in tones, it's really special what you can do with colour. It's fun.
It is, and what I always kind of surprised and impressed by is the level of kind of ability and the knowledge and the skills and techniques that historically people would have had in order to create the huge variation of colour. You were saying that the madder was used possibly for redcoats.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and when I was speaking to Alison at the Museum and Art Gallery, and she was saying, you know, when you look back and you think that so many of the textiles that they have in their collection came from before factory times, you just think of the level of work that went into it.
And the skill to produce the same colour consistently. Yeah. Because using natural materials, it is not easy to replicate the same shade over and over again. It changes by season. You know, one growing season to the next, the same plant will produce a different colour. If your water changes, it produces a different colour. If you have it a bit hotter or a bit cooler, so very, very skilled.
Yeah. It's amazing. And what I'm picking up today, finding out more about the sheep breeds and varieties, is how the blending of the wool is giving different tones, and that's actually really kind of lighting some light bulbs for me, because I know a lot of people go to exotic blends, or when I say exotic, things like mohair and angora, to try and get maybe the lighter effect of a yarn, to get some more drape, to get some more sheen. But kind of I'm seeing from the blends that you've done that actually you can get a similar effect just by knowing the sheep breed, knowing what's going to come out and playing with it. That way you don't automatically have to go for an exotic breed to give you the solution, which is fascinating.
Not necessarily. So this one is probably the most, I guess you'd say, using your term, the luxurious of the wools that I currently have. So it's a blend of blue-faced Leicester. These are from a wee flock on the Black Isle. And it's been blended with Surrey alpaca, and Surrey alpaca are the ones with the long coat, rather than your more typical, is it quarry? Oh gosh, I can't remember it. It's gone. No, there are two types of alpaca anyhow, and it's more typically the other type of alpaca that's used when you see the term alpaca.
Yeah.
So this is blended with Surrey alpaca, which is also it's quite a long fibre.
Yeah.
Blue-faced Leicester is quite a long fibre.
Yeah.
So you can just feel that this is quite dense, quite drapey, but also very soft.
Yeah.
And it was to produce we were talking about the depths of colour in it. So rather than the blue-faced Leicester is white, alpaca can be lots of different colours. Yeah. So to get the tones in this grey, silvery grey, the mill and John and Juliet and I at the mill talked about how to do it, and we've used a very dark alpaca and a less dark alpaca and the white blue-faced Leicester to come up with a silver grey. So we could have used one shade of alpaca and the one shade of blue-faced Leicester, but we chose to use two different shades of alpaca, which gives it much more depth in the resulting yarn.
And it's really interesting. Alpaca actually do really well in the UK and in Scotland, surprisingly.
Yeah, I don't know an enormous amount about alpaca and alpaca breeding, but they do. Yeah, they do these ones. This is from a flock in Kendal, so in the north of England. But yeah, no, you get some alpaca up around here.
There is it's a flock near Beaulieu, but the flock that I'll be going to see later on this year, I'm going to be going back to Skye to the Dunvegan alpaca, and they're doing fantastically well. Yeah. I guess they're mountainous.
Well, they are, animals. Yeah. The only thing that's possibly a bit different, I guess, from the Andes is it's probably a bit wetter, particularly in Skye. But so I don't know whether they need shelter. They may need more shelter than most typical breeds of sheep, I guess, but I don't know about that. They certainly won't mind the cold, I wouldn't think, because they're as you say, mountain animals up in the Andes.
And if people are interested in buying some of this yarn, if they want to find out more about it, where's the best place to find out more information for you?
So the best place is my website, which is blackisleyarns.co.uk. And I tend not always to have wool and yarn online all the time. I tend to go to updates, so I'm planning an update for later this week. And the focus of that one, this next update will be indigo. I probably won't have another update for a few weeks because I also go to shows. So I'm going to be exhibiting at Edinburgh Yarn Festival in March, and then I have a series of shows lined up around the year. So particularly if somebody's local, and even if they're not, if they've seen something they're interested in, or they've seen from my social media or website anything they're interested in is not showing online, they can just get in touch and I can always put something together. And I'm very happy to do individual dye batches for, if someone's got a particular colour in mind or a particular yarn that's I haven't dyed in the colour they're looking for, or whatever.
And if somebody's not quite sure about the yarn, if they're not sure how it's going to look or what's possible with it, you've had some really lovely samples and patterns that have done, which really show what is possible with the natural colours and the weights of the yarn. Where is the best place to take a look at some of these?
So these are all detailed. If you look at my blog, you'll see information on the designs that have been made in my yarn. So for this quite, as you were saying, talking about different weights.
Yeah.
This is the same shawl. The original version was designed in 4-ply, 60 grams of each shade, and then this is it knit up again with a different yarn. This is Shetland wool in DK weight, so you get a much thicker, cosier, squishy shawl, whereas this one is much more elegant, lightweight drapey.
Yeah.
So both of these, and these are all commercially available through Ravelry from the original designer.
Yeah.
So the designers have designed in my wool, and I can make up kits for the patterns, but you can also just buy the design as well.
I think it's a good way of dipping your toe in if you're not quite sure. If you've not knitted with this kind of yarn before, if you'd wanted somebody to hold your hand a little bit through the process, to be sure that you'll still come out with something that's wearable or giftable, starting with a kit or a pattern that somebody else has done is a great way to get you started.
It does, yes. And for instance, something like this cowl only uses 120 grams of wool, and in fact 120 grams gives you an allowance. So I put together kits to make the cowl, which include 120 grams, so 30 grams of each of 4 shades. You actually won't need quite that, but there's always a buffer in there just in case you knit very loose or you have a dreadful problem and need to chop a chunk out or something. Yeah. So that's a very economical knit. And I mean, I quite like if you're not sure about something. I really like knitting hats. Yeah. So this little hat used less than 100 grams of wool, so less than a skein of wool. Tried out a little bit of colour. Tried out using the natural grey. My daughter's been wearing it lots of the pom-poms. Needs reattaching. So you can just. I think if people are not sure, I would say just try. Yeah. And if somebody wanted just a sample, I'd be happy just to put together 10 grams of a few different.
Are people likely to have allergies to this? And so, I can never knit with Angora because my daughter is allergic to Angora. So even if I'm knitting with it for me, she would still pick that up eventually. So are there any kind of allergies that people need to be aware of with the yarn?
If you're allergic to lanolin, then I guess. Yeah. But otherwise, I have one new yarn which uses mohair, which I think some people struggle with. Yeah. I think probably similar way to Angora. It's got quite fluffy fibres. That's not released anyhow, and all the rest are either just pure wool or pure wool with a little bit of alpaca, so it shouldn't be. And in terms of the dye materials, they're all well respected, safe dye materials, well rinsed, just in the same way as a synthetic dye. So.
And what about Aftercare? Don't chuck it in the washing machine.
Don't put it in the washing machine.
What can we do to it?
So you can treat it. You can actually treat it much more roughly than you think. So when I dye, first thing I do is skein up the wool into whatever weights I'm going to be using, usually 100 grams. It goes thrown into a pot and cooked up to 80 degrees with a little bit of washing up liquid.
I think people would be quite shocked at what we do to the yarn when we dye.
That's scouring it. That's to get rid of any muck, any leftover oils from the spinning process, which are going to mean that the colour won't adhere properly to the fibre. So that's the first step. Yeah. Depending what I'm dyeing with, you may then repeat that with a mordant. So I use a salt called alum, and then you probably bring it back up to that temperature a third time with the actual dye material itself. So the main thing is not to shock it. Yes. So you can actually get the wool really quite hot. Yeah. But taking it from cool up to hot, it doesn't mind too much if you do that fairly quickly.
Yeah.
So you can put, you could probably dunk this shawl in at 60, 70 degrees straight off from room temperature.
Agitation.
But if you were to agitate, particularly with soap,
yeah.
or drop the temperature fast,
yeah.
chuck it from hot into cold water, that's where you hit problems. So you don't be scared. That's, probably don't put it in the washing machine. Although, to be perfectly honest, some of it would probably be fine, but just
how often do you really need to wash a hat?
And that's one of the benefits of it being minimally treated and not superwashed. You've still got all the natural properties of the wool in there, and wool is antibacterial. It absorbs moisture. It doesn't absorb the sweaty, yucky stuff. I used wool soakers on my nappies. Well, not my nappies, my kids' nappies.
Yeah.
And to save having to use the plastic outers, and wool absorbs up to sort of 30%, I think it is, of its own weight of moisture.
Oh, wow.
And you don't, this is going to sound revolting, it's going to sound awful to the uninitiated, but you don't wash a wool soaker very often. So it sits around a nappy, and as long as it hasn't got poo on it, it's absolutely fine. You air it out to dry, the urine does not, it soaks in terms of absorbing the moisture, but it doesn't absorb any of the nasty stuff. And so if you think that you can do that hygienically and without any smell at all, and washing it sort of every few weeks, you do lanolin a washable wool soaker on a nappy. So if you think you can do that, that shows you how infrequently you really need to wash a wool item.
I rarely wash things that I've knitted. I'll own up to that. I mostly air things and will maybe give them a rinse a sit in a sink of water very occasionally. But other than that, I just don't bother, because they don't seem to experience like the decay and the wear and tear that other garments do. Wool is generally quite a sturdy item.
It is. Well, it's got the natural properties. It's the sheep's protection from really, a lot of sheep have evolved in
if you could see Scottish
very harsh environments.
Yeah.
So they have, the wool is an amazing resource. It's an amazing material, and that's what's so special about using it and then wearing it, because it does keep you warm. And if it rains, you'll still be warm, and it'll dry out by itself. And it might. Well, I remember school blazers. They do get a bit smelly while they're drying, but that's they're still fine, and they still kept you warm, horrible as they were. To wash, I would say use a wool wash, and you could just use a supermarket wool wash with a tiny dab of it. I use commercial ones. There's one called Eucalan, and there's various other ones. There's one called Soak, and you just need the tiniest dab, lukewarm water. Pop the knitwear in the sink or a bowl, leave it for 20 odd minutes, drain it out, dry it in a towel, and that's you done.
So it's nothing to be scared of.
No,
that's the message.
It's actually really quite soothing, and it doesn't take long.
Good stuff. So hopefully some people will be interested in what they've seen today. They'll go and have a look at your website and give it a try, or maybe see you at the Edinburgh Yarn Festival coming up, out and about, and give some of the yarn a try, and help you go a little bit further on your journey of exploring British wool and Scottish wool, and see what else we can find. It's great stuff. Thank you very much for your time.